Hello, fellow travelers, and welcome to another episode of the Virgin Stars Podcast fourth season. My loyal listeners, thank you for your continued support. It's an amazing episode because Mick Giacchino boards the mothership to discuss the score to the Penguin on Max. Now, come aboard as we go traversing the stars. I'm Mr. Giacchino. Thank you for coming to Virgin Stars Podcast.
Thank you so much for having me on here.
Totally my pleasure. So, I always start with a question of inspiration, and so inspired your love for music and who your earliest influences.
Oh, I mean, there's so many. I really grew up listening to film scores. Up until about fifth grade, I was pretty much exclusively just listening to old Hollywood scores. And my dad was like, "I love that you're listening to all this stuff, but you should probably throw some pop music in there." And by pop music, he meant like Billy Joel and the Beatles, so not modern pop, but um, but I mean, I listened to so many artists from like Jerry Goldsmith to Eric Korngold. John Williams is an obvious one that I feel like it has to be said. Yeah, I mean, I grew up listening to a bunch of that old music.
So, obviously, as you probably are aware, that's unusual for a kid to be more into scores or classical than the new world pop kind of stuff, or whatever it is the kids listen to nowadays. That I'm also an old man. So, what drives you to listen to classical?
I mean, I think for me, like a lot of it is a lot of the film scores that I started listening to film scores first and then kind of made my way into classical. And the thing I loved about scores was just that it really brought you back into the world of the movie. And it had just this ability to transport you somewhere else. I remember going on a trip to go visit Yosemite National Park and listening to the Jurassic Park score. And it just really, made it so grand and surreal in a way that as beautiful as it is without music, it only elevated it.
You mentioned some of my favorites. Jerry Goldsmith, I'm a big fan of. I like for Hans Zimmer as well. I like in a lot of recent composers. So when you're thinking about what the music is doing to you when you're listening to it, especially like for films, you said it kind of brings you to life, right? When
Yeah.
you're thinking about composing music on your own, how are you thinking about how your music is bringing the films and TV shows to life?
I mean, ultimately, when scoring a project, it's all about just trying to either elevate or match what the picture is giving us and what the dialogue is. So it's really for me has always been about just what's the story, and it's so easy to get caught up in okay, like how do I make this as musical as I can, and then there's been so many times I can't tell you how. Where I've overscored a scene, and then I have to take a step back and look and listen to it once I've watched it, um, and realize, oh, I went a little too big and have to pull back. And because the second that it starts distracting from what's on screen, you're in trouble. But there, it obviously has its moments where uh, it should be a character, where just like in the shows, and it's all about just finding the balance for that.
So, as someone who is scoring these, great orchestra pieces, do you actually have to know how to play all the instruments that you're using for your score, or are you using like a synthesizer where they use to make the music?
Yeah, thankfully for my sake, no. I wish I could play oboe or violin or French horn or any of those instruments. But generally, when I'm writing, I use virtual instruments just as a placeholder. And they never sound quite as good as the real thing. It'll only get you so close. But I'm a piano player, and so I use my keyboard and virtual synth instruments to mimic the orchestra so that you can give the producers and directors, showrunners, just an idea of what the music will sound like once it's finally recorded. And there's always little details or playing techniques that aren't represented, and sometimes you have to be like, you know what, you're gonna have to trust me on this. It's gonna sound a little scratchier here, or it's gonna sound a little bit less nice, especially on this show where there's a lot of uneasiness and tension that comes from just the way the players play. So there was a few moments of, all right, just trust me, this will be, it'll take it over the line here with that. So
And I think the great thing about, I mean, one of the things that to me might be underappreciated with great composers is I feel like you're not only have to, you not can't only just be a student of music, you have to be a student of literature. You have to understand how to delve into a character and then express it musically in a way that most people, probably including the writer, isn't even thinking about. So do you develop those skills to understand the literary qualities of what you're working on so you can find the musical connection for those pieces?
yeah, that's a great question because I mean, again, story is so important for all of this, especially when working to films. So, I mean, definitely, I would look back to all my English classes that I took in school and in college, but also the film classes I took, and just watching films growing up and looking at it from a perspective of, all right, what is it that is making me feel this thing in the story? And again, you got to break down the characters, you got to break down, figure out what is going on with these people, and then look at everything around it too. Like, how is the sound design impacting it? How is again the dialogue choices, the impacting it? How is the choice to use music or no music and in a scene? And really what's getting at these emotions that you're feeling from this project, and how do we get there?
And for those, I mean, I'm sure if you're watching this, you already do know, but right now the composer to a great TV series on Max for the Penguin, which seems to be not only been loved by his audience and the comic book audience. Let's face it, comic book audience is pretty critical. We're a critical bunch, and the critics also loving the Penguin a lot. So how do you get involved with the project, and what intrigued you most about the concept of working on the Penguin?
Well, so for at first, in terms of getting involved in the Penguin, it was I had my dad scored the Batman, and I had growing up, he had always had whenever there was a source cue or like a which is diegetic music that's heard within the film for those who don't know. Whenever there was a little cue like that, he would throw it my way. Like and like in Jurassic World, there's a scene where the kids are waiting in line for a ride, and the music that's playing over the loudspeaker is something I wrote. And so from there, I just kind of started writing more cues, and I've had a couple of shows under my belt, and at this point, when we realized that the Batmobile chase was a scene that initially was not supposed to have music in the film. It was initially just supposed to be sound design, and they last minute decided they needed something, but my dad had already gone into scoring Spider-Man at that point, so he was like, "Hey, like, we need some music here. Is this something you would want to do?" And I said, "Of course," and it was so exciting, so intimidating as well for such a big sequence. But yeah, and then from there, I got to know Matt and work with Matt and Matt Reeves, and then so that's kind of was my in for the Penguin when it came time to work on that. And I think the thing that intrigued me the most about the show was that it's more than just it felt like more than just a story about a supervillain. It felt like you were really getting to know this guy as a human being, and just how complex he is. And especially the scene where you meet Francis's mother in the first episode was really what sold it for me. I mean, I was already in before then, but that whole sequence where he's about to tell her that spoiler alert if you haven't seen the show yet, but that he killed Alberto Falcone, and you're expecting her to go off on him, and then she's does, but in a way of like, be proud of this. This is what you deserve. Like, the city is going to be yours. And that was what was really, really exciting to me about the show, is that it's like, oh, this is so twisted, and it only continues to grow more twisted from there.
I think that's interesting about the Penguin, because when you think about before the show came out, and you just think about what the Penguin is, you're like, all right, so this is going to be a series about a relatively minor Batman villain, that kind of shows up for a few minutes in the film. You're like, whatever. But then you watch it, and it's so intricate, it's so layered, and it kind of feels like, I mean, there's because you know who the Penguin is. You have that Batman, kind of background to it. It kind of feels a little bit like a old school Scorsese gangster film, right? So you kind of have that right there. Um, and then it's just a good character study. So when you're thinking about the score, and the feel of the score, are you thinking Batman? Are you thinking Godfather just about? Or you like what kind of genre are you putting this film into so you can kind of connect it with the score?
So, well, starting off, the conversation was always, all right, this needs to feel somewhat connected to the film to an extent because it is within the world of the Batman. And so that definitely was a big inspiration for this, but it also had to have its own qualities to it as well. And um, well, the Batman, the score is very elegant, and Batman as a character is this very slow, imposing being that is dominating all the scenes that he's in, and whereas Oz is always his gears are always moving in his head. He's always trying to stay one step ahead of everything. And essentially improvising as he goes, and so there's a little bit more of a chaos and freneticism to it than the Batman. So I kind of that kind of led me to I always like to describe the score as like a demented cousin from the film, where it's related, but something's off about it. So yeah, from there we knew it was going to be a string based score. And somewhat orchestral with a little bit of brass here and there where we needed it, but I really wanted to lean into again that kind of freneticism of it, and then as the show progresses, it continues to get darker and more menacing and tense.
And then you said you're coming to the Batman franchise, which Penguin obviously is. And the Batman films, I mean, there's such a long history of famous scores. I mean, you got your Elfman scores, Hans Zimmer, like I said, your father has a well-known score. Is it intimidating to work on a franchise that has that much weight behind it?
Yes, definitely. I would say so. But I think one of the things that was helpful about this show is that, again, it didn't necessarily feel like a comic book show, like working on it. And I'm sure watching it too. There's, they really are doing something with this character where they're just focusing on who he is and what drives him and Sophia Falcone as well. And so that I think made it a little bit less intimidating just in terms of working on it. Of course, once we finished it and all the ads start coming out and you see his face everywhere all over like Times Square and on in the Apple store and stuff, I was like, oh, this is real. This is definitely some of that anxiety started to come back. But it's yeah, I think once you kind of break it down into just okay, what is the story about, like what does the show need, you kind of are in your own little bubble for a little while until the announcements start coming in and the show is then released to the public, and then it's no longer yours. It's shared with everyone who's watching it.
So when you're trying to determine themes for a character, the Penguin, in many ways, far beyond what he's in the comic books, is a very complex character in the series. Um, I mean, when you're thinking about the type of themes you're working on, even though he's the protagonist of the series, you can't call him a hero. He's not. I mean, the hero of his own mind, out quite obviously, but he's hard to find as a hero. He's a villain, but at the same time, he is villainous to villains as well. I mean, the Falcone family and Maronis are no more heroic than he is in any way, shape, or form, and he's kind of focusing on that. How are you placing him? Are you writing him as the hero of his own story? Are you writing him as the villain that he would be viewed as by eventually Batman Gotham? What aspect of him are you focusing on?
Yeah, so this was probably one of the most difficult aspects of the show is figuring out kind of like our perspective and whose head we're in, because there's moments where you want to be in Oz's head, um, and because you want to sympathize with him to an extent. Like for example, the scene in the bathroom with Victor in episode 3, where they're having this moment, and Oz is clearly hurt that Victor feels trapped, and whereas he thought it was this friendship, and it's moments like that where you kind of almost forget for a second about all the horrible things that he's done, where you're like, oh, this guy's real. So yeah, there's a couple different aspects to his. He has a couple different motifs that build that are that make up his theme. One of which is just kind of the strings doing the ba-yan, da-yan, which is I like to refer to as his angry chords, but also can be used as in a shameful way, or in a way where he's working everything through in his head, and and he's trying to figure out what to do, so that kind of plays to those elements of him. And then there's the bada bada bum, which is more of just, again, more of his scurrying kind of like mind racing kind of, working on uh, uh, getting on top. And then but then there's also Francis's theme, which ends up becoming, especially as the series goes on, it becomes very tied to Oz as well, and becomes an ambition theme, because this is a guy who is overlooked by everyone around him. No one believes, everyone just sees him as the right hand man, or the underling, or and he is the only one who really sees himself as more than what those around him see. So that theme represents his, again, his drive, and kind of, and it all goes back to his mother as well, because that's what she's instilling in him from the first episode, and from, as we'll find out, just from a young age as well. Yeah, there's a bunch of different sides to him, and it really just we tried to pick our moments where we wanted to feel sympathy for him, or we wanted to connect with him, while also being very cautious to not connect with him too much, as this guy is a monster, as you'll continue to see throughout the show.
So the name of the theme, and I'm sure I'm getting this right, is called, if I pronounce it wrong, correct me, Scherzo of the Flightless Bird. Is that correct?
Yeah, yeah, scherzo for a flightless bird.
Scherzo.
Yeah.
Sorry, I knew I was going to get it wrong. I wasn't positive how I was going to get it wrong, but I knew I was going to. And for those who don't know, the word means joke in Italian, right? So how does that idea of the joke for the Flightless Bird kind of play into your theme?
Yeah, so scherzo is actually, it does mean a joke in a time, but it's also a musical term for a movement in a symphony, which is generally the faster movement. And
Okay.
so it was, I don't know if you guys are familiar with my dad's track listings for his cues. There's a lot of puns and play on words and jokes in there, and so that was just kind of, it felt right to use it as a just for the name, to just in a playful sense. But it really, it's just kind of came about. It could, because when listening back to it, I was like, oh, this could be like, the scherzo movement of a string quartet or so, and it felt fitting.
Cause I really think it does have a great title to it. Because I mean, there's a part of my brain that's going as well. The idea of the joke of being a bird but still can't fly. I thought, like,
Yeah.
I was going there as well with it. And I do agree with you when you think about the score. There is a drivenness to it and a frenetic quality to it. And I love the strings. Now you're using, is that a violin? Is that a cello? What were you using for
Yeah,
the?
so I mean, it really is a full string section. And one last thing I just wanted to add on to the last bit was that I realized that another reason for the naming was that there's a piano suite from the Batman called Sonata in Darkness, and so I figured it would be kind of a nice way to connect it to that, to use some musical terms and some of the names of these cues. But yeah, no, the score. I mean, that cue in particular, it's very violin featured, but and violin heavy, but it starts out as a string quartet, with two violins, viola, and a cello, just soloists. And from there, as it goes on, and as it gets bigger, and the energy's picking up, I slowly added the rest of the string section in, so that it would kind of become grander. And again, just there's having that many people playing that fast together creates a little bit of a freneticism that I was really liking. And so it's yeah, just it's really starting small, and building bigger as it goes.
And I may be wrong. It's something, there's a little distortion to the sound to it, a little bit, as is it, or because the way how much effort the strings are being used, you get that little extra sound to it.
Yeah, I think so. And then I mean, also the other element that is in there is there's a lot of percussion, and that percussion is there's a drum kit, but it's a very special drum kit that we created for the series, where it's made out of trash cans. Um, Whereas, we took the kick drum and replaced it with one of those Oscar the Grouch style metal trash cans, and there's buckets on there. The cymbals are trash can lids, and because the idea of this guy wanting to be more than he is. That's what initially I was thinking about with the string section of like, okay, strings are, when people think of a string quartet, they're usually thinking about elegance and high society, and that's what he wants, but he's not quite there yet. So I decided to lean into the, again, more hairy side of it all. And the other element that I thought the trash can percussion kit would bring to it is just a slightly city, an energy of the city as well, and an energy of Gotham. And Batman it comes from this high society rich family, and Oz comes from the streets. So I wanted to try to incorporate that into his theme somehow.
Like I said, I mean, it's a wonderful a wonderful theme. Um, Now, the other thing that's kind of interesting as well, as you mentioned a little bit earlier in the interview, is the use of silence. There are definitely times where the music is not present, and in many ways is, I don't say as musical, but is expressing as much as when the songs are playing. So when you're scoring the film, uh, the series, how are you determining when you're going to utilize the silence of musical silence?
Yeah, so that's a lot of that comes from Lauren LaFranc, the showrunner, and what she was looking for, and in figuring out kind of where she wants music, where she doesn't. Sometimes I'd be like, oh, you know what, I feel like this could use something, or you know what, this one scene, like the performances are great, we don't need to put anything in here. And so it's really a back and forth and trying to figure out what worked best for it. But I mean, because ultimately, I think that knowing when to have silence is just as important as when to have music, because so often it can music can be wall to wall, which again works for certain movies, certain shows, but for this one in particular, it really needed to let the actors take the lead and let the show breathe as well, so we could develop this sense of tension and really make the music count where when it comes in.
So as a composer, is it hard to step back and allow silence to perform for you? Is it tempting to be like, let me just put a little something in there. Let me just write a little piece to it for that moment.
Well, I mean, usually it allows you to focus more on on the other scenes as well. But there's there'll be times where you write a cue that and after it's recorded and approved, and then on the dub stage they might be like, you know what, like now I'm hearing it with all the sounds, like it's too crowded, and I think that actually we don't need music. And in the moment you might feel like, oh, like like I wanted that there, and then you watch it and you're like, oh, you know what, okay, that works. I see what they're going for with that. So, I mean, ultimately, it's again, I just feel like it's like whatever makes the story better and whatever makes the show better is okay with me. And you just kind of have to put aside any attachments you have to certain cues, and just and again move forward with what's best for the show.
And the show has a lot of other pieces of soundtrack. There's songs by Dolly Parton, When in Rome, Rita Hayworth, a bunch of other stuff. Are you in the conversations for when those type of songs are going to be in the series? And does that impact how you think about the score when you have all these other, quite often classic, I guess classic pop maybe from back in the day or country? And how does that all work with your score?
Yeah, so I mean, those usually aren't my decisions. Those are between Lauren and the music supervisor, and the music supervisor really helps find all those songs and will get them approved or licensed and all of that. But it does affect score in certain in certain moments, because like for example in the second episode of the series, when they're doing the FEMA heist, the FEMA truck heist. The They had wanted score throughout that whole sequence in the car leading up to the Bobby Darin song that plays as the shootout begins. And I wrote this whole cue that played throughout, and we realized that there was an issue of uh, not knowing exactly how to hand off from score to the song without releasing the tension, because the second you start the music at the beginning of that sequence, there's a tension, and with the placement of where they wanted the song to be, there was no elegant way to get out of the score without it feeling like, wait, okay, what's happening? Or we've lost something, like we've lost some energy here. So what we realized was that music wasn't what should be driving that scene. It should be the sound effects. And so we ended up cutting the music out earlier, and finding a good spot to let it go and build up to them getting into the truck and then going silent with it. So and really driving with the sounds of the engines. And as the Maronis start coming in, like the engine sounds start getting more intense, and then that let the song come in a way more natural way, and just it made the whole thing work together much better than it would have with scored in that sequence.
Now with the Penguin series, the soundtrack, the theme, the main theme, as I mentioned, the Scherzo of the flavor. Am I correct on? Did I get it right that time?
Scherzo. Yeah,
All
Scherzo.
right, I'm ballparking, unfortunately.
It's okay.
But that one's available on iTunes and Spotify, things of that nature. Is the rest of the sound of the score going to show up on these platforms or no?
Yes, that'll be coming out. I believe within a few days of the last episode airing, or so, within the week. Some after episode 8 airs, the score will be coming out. I was actually just sending some emails about it earlier today. So,
So for those of us who do want to hear the score sooner, why are you making us wait so long?
but more just it's more for they wanted to put out the score as a whole. And so rather than doing just a couple cues at a time for each episode, and they wanted to it's more just to avoid spoilers for later in the series. So
Spoilers in the title, or are we talking about like musical spoilers? Because I know, as a fan of scores, the music can sometimes spoil a moment. Are we talking about musical spoilers or title spoilers?
probably a little bit of both. I don't think there's many title spoilers that really will give you a whole lot, but definitely, I think just the arc of the score. You can kind of infer some things. And I mean, I know like when the Phantom Menace came out, I think the track list leaked, and I think there was a cue called Qui Gon Dies, or Qui Gon's Funeral. I think I forget exactly what it was called, but so I think since then people have been trying to be a little bit more careful with with releasing the scores before things are finished.
Are you able to announce how many tracks we're gonna have on the score?
Yeah, it should be off the top of my head. I forget, but I think it's probably in the 30 range or
Oh,
so.
yeah.
I forget, yeah, maybe 20 to 30. Yeah, I'm looking at it right now. It's we have 29 score tracks and 2 song tracks.
All right, like I said, when you're able to talk about some of your projects, other projects, please come back on the show, sir. Absolute pleasure to talk with you.
Up to great. Thank you so much for having me on.
No problem. Have a great night, sir.
Great, thank you. You too.
Thanks for listening to another episode of the Burning Stars podcast. Please like and subscribe. Turn for the next episode when Sandy King boards the mothership to discuss Storm King comics. To next voyage, travel on.